The witch of the in-laws' house. Sara had always dreamt of a perfect life with her new husband, Lucas. The two of them had recently tied the knot and were eager to start their new life together. Lucas was the kind of man who made her feel like the luckiest woman in the world. But when they moved into his late mother's old family home, things took an unsettling turn. The house was an old Victorian mansion, inherited from his mother, who had passed away several years prior. It was massive and beautiful, with dusty old furniture and creaky wooden floors that had a history all their own. Lucas assured Sara it was the perfect place to settle down. "It's been in my family for generations," he said, smiling as he proudly showed her around. But as the days passed, Sara couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. At night, strange whispers echoed through the house, barely audible, but unmistakable. She'd wake in the middle of the night, frozen, listening to the soft murmurs that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Objects that were once in one place would move on their own, as though someone was playing a game with her. And worst of all, there was an unnatural coldness that would spread through the rooms, creeping up her spine like icy fingers. No matter how many blankets she piled on her bed or how much she cranked up the heating, it never went away. One evening, as Sara was reading in the living room, she saw a shadow pass by the hallway mirror. It moved quickly, and when she looked up, there was no one there. Her heart pounded, and she quickly stood up, calling out to Lucas. But he was nowhere to be found, leaving Sara alone in the eerie house. Maybe it's just the house settling, she told herself, though the words felt hollow in her throat. But then, one night, she began to feel like someone was watching her. As she walked through the dimly lit hallways, she would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of her eye. Faces, faint, like ghosts, seemed to stare at her from portraits on the walls, their eyes following her as she moved. One night, she could no longer ignore it. She decided to confront the mystery head-on. With a flashlight in hand, she searched the attic, the basement, and every corner of the house. Nothing. But as she was about to give up, she stumbled upon something she wasn't expecting. An old diary belonging to Lucas's mother. Opening the weathered pages, she uncovered a chilling secret. Lucas's late mother, Eleanor, had been a witch. She had dabbled in dark magic and had cursed the very walls of the house before her death. A curse that tied her soul to the home for eternity. The diary spoke of a ritual that Eleanor had performed to ensure her immortality. Her spirit would remain bound to the house, tormenting anyone who dared live there unless her curse was broken. Sara shuddered as she read about Eleanor's dark magic. The twisted rites, the sacrifices, and the haunting power that would grow stronger with each passing day. She realized with growing horror that she wasn't just dealing with the restless ghost of a grieving mother. She was facing the spirit of a powerful witch who had no intention of letting Sara leave the house alive. It wasn't long before the witch's influence grew more oppressive. Sara's sleep became plagued with terrifying dreams. Visions of Eleanor's ghostly face, her eyes glowing with malevolent fire, whispering terrible secrets into her ears. In one dream, Eleanor even appeared before her, her ghostly hand reaching for Sara's throat, choking her with an icy grip. Terrified, Sara turned to Lucas, hoping that he could provide some answers. But when she confronted him, he was strangely distant, his eyes clouded with suspicion. He revealed a horrifying truth. His mother had made him swear an oath before her death. If he ever married, he would bring her spirit back to life by allowing her to take the life force of his wife. She would live on through his chosen bride. Lucas's face twisted with grief. "I never wanted this, Sara," he whispered. "But you are her successor now. You've been chosen." The weight of her situation hit her like a ton of bricks. The witch's curse could only be lifted if Sara became her successor, if she agreed to inherit Eleanor's dark power and continue her legacy. It was the only way to survive. If she refused, her soul would be torn apart and the witch's wrath would consume her. Desperately, Sara tried to fight back. She researched every possible way to break the curse. Rituals, prayers, exorcisms, but nothing worked. The house seemed alive, the walls closing in on her, the coldness intensifying. Eleanor's spirit was growing stronger by the hour, her whispers more insistent, demanding that Sara comply with her wishes. In a final, desperate bid to break free, Sara decided to confront the witch's spirit. Armed with a strange talisman she found in the attic, A relic said to have once belonged to the family's original matriarch, Sara faced Eleanor's ghost in the darkened living room. Eleanor's face appeared before her, pale and cruel, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You cannot escape your fate, my dear," she hissed, her voice like the sound of scratching nails on a chalkboard. "You belong to me now." But Sara stood tall, the talisman glowing in her hand. With a final cry, she invoked the power of the artifact, calling on the strength of the generations that had come before her. The room filled with a blinding light as Eleanor's ghost let out a scream of rage. The battle was brutal. The walls seemed to close in on her, the house itself fighting to keep the curse intact. But in the end, it was Sara who triumphed. With a final burst of strength, she shattered the talisman, releasing the dark energy that had bound the witch's spirit to the house. The house trembled as Eleanor's ghost was torn away, her spirit finally banished. The temperature in the house slowly returned to normal, the oppressive weight lifting from Sara's chest. She collapsed to the floor, exhausted but free. But even as she thought the nightmare was over, a chilling whisper echoed through the empty halls. "You can never escape me, Sara." The monster in the attic. Rachel had always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding, and when she married Jonathan, she thought she had found her perfect happily ever after. Jonathan was kind, charming, and had a way of making her feel safe and loved. But when they moved into his childhood home, an old, creaky mansion nestled on the outskirts of town, Rachel began to realize that some fairy tales came with dark, terrifying twists. The house was massive, with high ceilings and dark wooden floors that groaned and creaked underfoot. It was the kind of place that had a history, a long, mysterious one that Rachel could feel in every shadow and every cold breeze that seemed to pass through the rooms. Jonathan's family had lived there for generations, but Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was watching her. The first few nights were calm enough, but then strange things started happening. At night, the house would grow eerily silent, save for the unsettling sound of footsteps above her in the attic. At first, Rachel tried to convince herself it was just the house settling. But the sounds didn't stop. They grew louder, like someone or something was pacing back and forth. Sometimes she heard what sounded like scratching, like claws dragging across wood. The temperature in the house also dropped, especially near the attic stairs. No matter how much she turned up the heat, the cold seemed to linger, settling into the bones of the house. Rachel would wake up in the middle of the night, her breath visible in the air as she lay frozen beneath the blankets. One evening, after hearing the sounds again, Rachel could no longer ignore her growing dread. Jonathan had gone to visit his father, leaving Rachel alone in the house. She decided to investigate the attic, hoping to find some logical explanation for the disturbances. She climbed the narrow staircase that led to the attic, her flashlight shaking in her hand. As she reached the top, a cold gust of air hit her, and she shuddered. The attic was cluttered with old furniture, dusty boxes, and forgotten memories. But it was the far corner of the room that caught her attention. There, hidden behind a stack of old trunks, was a door she had never seen before. The door was small and old-fashioned, with rusted hinges and an eerie sense of finality about it. Rachel hesitated for a moment, her heart racing in her chest, but something compelled her to open it. Inside was a forgotten room, dark, with the smell of mildew and something else, something faintly metallic. As she stepped further into the room, her flashlight flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. She froze as she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The walls were covered with drawings, terrifying, grotesque images that seemed to pulse with life. Strange symbols, distorted faces, and clawed hands seemed to emerge from the paper, as if they were trying to escape. In the center of the room, propped up on an old easel, was a portrait of a woman, Jonathan's mother, Eleanor. Her eyes seemed to follow Rachel as she moved, her smile frozen in an expression of eerie satisfaction. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Eleanor had disappeared years ago, vanishing without a trace. Jonathan had never spoken much about his mother, but she knew the loss had left a mark on him. Now, standing before the portrait, Rachel began to feel that same coldness creep into her bones. Something was terribly wrong. As she examined the drawings closer, Rachel noticed a disturbing pattern. The images depicted a ritual, one that involved transforming a person into something monstrous. The more she studied, the clearer it became. Eleanor, Jonathan's mother, had not simply disappeared. She had been turned into a creature, a grotesque, monstrous thing, through a dark ritual gone horribly wrong. Rachel's heart pounded as she pieced together the truth. Eleanor had tried to cheat death, to preserve her beauty and power by sacrificing something far more important, her humanity. The ritual had worked, but the consequences were disastrous. Eleanor's body had been twisted, her soul trapped inside a monstrous form, and her spirit bound to the house. The creature in the attic was her, half human, half beast, hungering for vengeance. The scratching noises, the coldness in the air, the unsettling presence in the house, it was all Eleanor's doing. And now, the monster that Eleanor had become was hunting Rachel, seeking to claim her as the next victim of the cursed ritual. In a panic, Rachel fled from the room, but she could feel the eyes of the creature following her, watching her every move. She knew she had to confront the monster before it consumed her and the entire family. She went straight to Jonathan's father, hoping he might have some answers, but the truth was worse than she could have imagined. Jonathan's father revealed that Eleanor's monstrous form had been hidden away in the attic for years. He had hoped to protect his son from the truth, but now it was too late. Eleanor's spirit had grown stronger over the years, and her desire for revenge had become insatiable. The house, cursed by her dark magic, was a prison for her, and now Rachel was the next target. Rachel knew what she had to do. The only way to stop the monster in the attic, to end the curse and free Jonathan from the ghostly grip of his mother, was to confront Eleanor's spirit directly. She armed herself with a set of ritualistic candles and an ancient incantation she had discovered in the hidden room. In the dead of night, Rachel returned to the attic, the air thick with tension. The scratching had stopped, but she could feel the presence of the creature closing in on her. She began the ritual, chanting the incantation, hoping against hope that it would work. Suddenly, the room filled with a terrible guttural growl. Eleanor's monstrous form appeared before her, a horrific blend of human and beast, towering and ferocious, with glowing eyes that burned with rage. "You cannot escape me," the creature snarled, her voice a twisted echo of Eleanor's once beautiful tone. But Rachel was determined. She finished the ritual, summoning every ounce of strength and courage she had. The air crackled with energy as the candles flickered wildly and the creature let out a blood-curdling scream. In a final desperate clash, Rachel faced Eleanor's spirit, her heart pounding in her chest. The battle was brutal. Eleanor fought to keep her monstrous form, but Rachel's will was stronger. With a final burst of light, the curse was broken. The creature crumpled, its twisted body collapsing into a heap of ash. The house fell silent. Rachel stood there trembling as the coldness lifted from the room. The monster in the attic was gone, and with it, the curse that had haunted Jonathan's family for years. As the first light of dawn broke through the attic window, Rachel knew that she had freed them all. But as she turned to leave, she couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. Was it truly over? Or had the house merely found a new way to hold its secrets?
The Witch's Curse. Sara had always dreamed of a fairy tale romance. When she met Robert, a charming and handsome man from a wealthy family, it felt like a dream come true. His family estate was grand, sitting on the edge of a dense forest with towering gates and ivy-covered walls. It was a place that seemed stuck in time, and for Sara it felt like the perfect home. But from the moment Sara met Robert's mother, Edith, something felt off. Edith was polite but distant, her gaze always sharp, as if she were looking right through Sara. When they first met, Edith barely acknowledged Sara's presence, offering only a cold handshake before turning away. It wasn't the warmth Sara had expected from a mother-in-law. Still, she chalked it up to nerves. After all, she was marrying her son. But that coldness lingered, like a shadow that wouldn't leave her alone. Sara's new life started out like a dream. The mansion was beautiful, filled with antiques, tapestries, and portraits of Robert's ancestors. Yet there were strange things that began to happen. She would find items out of place, or hear soft whispers when no one else was around. She often felt a chill creeping up her spine, though the house was always warm. Late at night, she would hear someone pacing the halls, but when she would investigate, there was no one there. It wasn't long before Sara began to feel isolated. Robert, though loving, was often away on business, leaving her alone with his mysterious mother. Edith never seemed to sleep. She would often appear in the kitchen late at night, her pale face illuminated by the dim light of a single candle. Sara had never seen her look so unsettling. The eyes that once seemed calm now held a dark, predatory gleam. One evening, after another unsettling encounter with Edith, Sara decided to confront her. She waited until Robert was away and then made her way to the old, neglected wing of the house, where Edith rarely went. The door creaked as Sara pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. At the end of the hallway was a large door, one Sara had never dared to open. Her curiosity overcame her fear, and she walked toward it. The room inside was small, cluttered with old books and odd trinkets. But what caught Sara's attention was the massive, ancient-looking book resting on a pedestal in the center. Its cover was engraved with strange symbols that seemed to pulse with energy. Sara felt an overwhelming urge to open it. Her fingers trembled as she turned the pages, filled with old rituals and spells. One spell, in particular, caught her eye. It was a curse, one meant to bind someone to eternal servitude. Why would Edith keep something like this? Sara whispered to herself, horrified but strangely fascinated. Suddenly, Sara heard footsteps behind her. She turned quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. There, standing in the doorway, was Edith, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have looked," Edith said, her voice cold and sharp. Sara tried to speak, but no words came out. Edith stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into," Edith murmured, more to herself than to Sara. She raised her hand, and before Sara could react, the room seemed to close in on her. The walls blurred, and the air grew thick with the scent of burning herbs and the sound of chanting. The next thing Sara knew, she was back in her own bedroom, her body trembling. The room felt wrong, and when she looked into the mirror, she gasped. Her reflection had changed. Her skin was paler, her eyes darker, and her features sharper, as though she were slowly transforming into something else. The days that followed were a blur. Sara began to feel her body changing in terrifying ways. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and the strange whispers grew louder in her mind. It was as if someone or something was trying to take over her body. She knew Edith was responsible, but she didn't know how to stop it. Every time she confronted her mother-in-law, Edith would simply smile, her eyes glinting with dark satisfaction. Desperate, Sara turned to the old book she had found in the forbidden room. She had to find a way to break the curse before it consumed her entirely. Flipping through the pages, she discovered a spell that could reverse the curse, but it came with a terrible cost. To undo the transformation, Sara would have to sacrifice something of great value. The spell didn't specify what, but Sara knew what it meant. One night, after a particularly frightening encounter with Edith, Sara made up her mind. She would break the curse, no matter the cost. She prepared the ritual, gathering the ingredients she had read about, and waited for the right moment. When Robert returned home that evening, Sara confronted him, telling him everything. She explained the curse, the transformation, and Edith's dark powers. At first, Robert didn't believe her, but Sara's desperate pleas and her eerie, almost otherworldly appearance convinced him. They needed to stop Edith before it was too late. Together, they made their way to the forbidden wing of the house. Edith was waiting for them, as though she had known they would come. But what Sara didn't expect was the truth Edith revealed. "You think you've been cursed?" Edith sneered. "No, my dear, I didn't curse you. I've been protecting you." Confusion filled Sara's mind. What do you mean?" Edith smiled, a wicked grin spreading across her face. "You were always meant to be the vessel. You were never meant to marry my son. I didn't want you to be taken by the darkness, but now it's too late." As Sara looked at Robert, horror flooded her veins. Robert wasn't the man she thought he was. His eyes, once warm and kind, were now cold and unfeeling. He stepped forward, and for the first time, Sara saw the same gleam in his eyes that she had seen in Edith's. "You see," Robert said, his voice now hollow, "I wasn't just protecting you. I was saving my family's legacy. You were chosen from the beginning." The spell that Sara had read in the book had been meant to bind her to the family, forever. The price for breaking the curse had been her soul. Robert had never been the innocent man she thought he was. He was just another pawn in Edith's dark plan, and now Sara was nothing more than a vessel to carry on their evil bloodline. As Sara's body began to twist and contort, the final realization hit her like a wave. She wasn't the victim, she was the sacrifice. The last thing Sara saw before everything went dark was Robert's smiling face, a twisted reflection of the man she had once loved. And in that moment, she realized the curse was never meant to be broken. It had only just begun.